Step into the room like it's just another shift. Stand still. Listen to the machines, the small talk, the ordinary boredom. Now feel the air change. First as a sting in your throat, then as heat that steals your breath. Today you'd reach for an exit sign without thinking. Back then, the building could turn that instinct into a dead end. Keep your eyes on the doors, because the danger won't announce itself. It will simply arrive, and start closing options until you realize you're counting seconds with your lungs alone. On the evening of March 25th, 1911, in New York City, a sweatshop caught fire. Not a battlefield, not a riot, a workplace. And by the time it was over, 146 people were dead. This was not one freak moment. This was a set of choices, stacked quietly, until they became a trap. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to take you back to the Ash Building at 23 to 29 Washington Place. We're going to move through it the way a body moves through a space. Eyes first, then feet, then breath. We'll stay close to what can be known, and we'll resist the comforting story that this was just an accident. Triangle Waste Company occupied the 8th, 9th, and 10th floors. 3 levels above the street. 3 levels where work was supposed to be routine. That's the point. Danger rarely announces itself. It blends into the daily rhythm until the day it stops being background. Stay with the scale of it. 3 floors is not a mountain. It is close enough to feel reachable, close enough to believe you're safe. That's why this story is so unsettling. You don't need an earthquake for a building to betray you. You just need ordinary architecture, ordinary rules, ordinary work, until one ordinary thing changes and the whole system turns against you in seconds. 1. We start outside, at street level, where the building looks ordinary because buildings always do. 2. We go up, not to hunt for villains, but to understand how a place can narrow your options without you noticing. 3. We follow the logic of the event, step by step, until the ending feels less like a shock and more like an outcome. Because that's the question that matters. Not how terrible was it. You already know it was. The real question is simpler and colder. How does a room that exists to make clothes become a wall of heat that makes escape impossible? If you're watching this from the present, you carry assumptions you don't even realize you have. You assume a workplace has exits that work the way your instincts expect. You assume the path you took in will still be there when you need it. You assume help can reach you. In 1911, those assumptions were not guaranteed. And when they fail, they don't fail politely. They fail all at once. So don't look away. Don't treat this like a distant headline. Stand with me in the doorway of that building and let the details do what they always do. Remove the illusion of safety. But to understand why they could not get out, we have to look at the structure that kept them in. 2. Stay on the street. Don't rush inside yet. Stand where the sidewalk meets the building and tilt your head back until your neck tightens. You're close enough to feel the city's pulse. Footsteps, carts, voices folding into one dull, end-of-day noise, and then something sharper cuts through it. You hear glass break. Then, for a beat, nothing. Then shouting returns, louder, layered, wrong. Look up at the upper floors. The windows don't look like a stage. They look like any other row of rectangles in a busy city. The kind you never remember 5 minutes later. That's what makes it dangerous. A place can look ordinary right up until it isn't. The fire begins on the 8th floor, and it doesn't creep, it takes. It finds what's waiting for it, cotton waste, paper, and it moves as if the room was built to feed it. From down here you can't see the fuel, you only see the speed. You might want to cover your mouth. The air tastes as smoke threads down buildings. People press closer, then recoil, a wave that can't decide. Someone points, someone screams a name. The sound bounces off walls and comes back empty. Now watch what happens when help meets physics. Firefighters arrive, but the ladders reach only to the 6th floor, 2 floors short, close enough to tease you with the idea of rescue, far enough to make that idea useless. People lean out of windows above that line, and you can feel the crowd tense, as if the street itself is holding its breath. A net is stretched below, It's a human attempt at mercy, and then it tears. Not because anyone wanted it to fail, but because the situation has already outgrown the tools meant to answer it. This is the part that feels unbearable, because it happens in public. You don't have to imagine it in a closed room. You can see bodies at windows searching for air, searching for a path that isn't there. Some fall, some jump. Those words sound different when you're looking up from the pavement. And notice what the street can't do. The street can watch, the street can shout, the street can pray, but the street can't climb those last floors. It can't open a door, it can't clear a hallway, it can't change the way a building divides space. So stay here a moment longer and let that sink in. The rescue stops where the ladders stop. Everything above that line, every decision, every mistake, every locked-in second, belongs to the inside. Next, we go up to the 8th floor, where the fire starts, and we step into the room that was already full of the things that burn. 3. We're on the 8th floor. Stay close to the room itself, not the headlines, not the aftermath. The room. Somewhere in here, the fire likely began with a discarded cigarette. That detail matters because it's so small. Not lightning, not sabotage. One ordinary habit meeting a space that was ready to burn. Look around. Long work tables, bulky machines, narrow aisles that force bodies into single-file movement even on a normal day. Fabric close to hands, paper close to feet. Cotton waste waiting in piles like dry tinder. This is not a scene designed for escape. It's a scene designed for production, and that's the trap. A factory floor doesn't feel dangerous when it's doing what it was built to do. Noise, motion, repetition, the push of work. But the moment flame touches cotton or paper, the room changes its purpose. It stops being a place to make clothing and becomes a place that makes heat. The fire starts on the 8th floor, and it spreads quickly, not because anyone is slow, not because anyone is weak, but because the materials are eager and the space is tight. Heat presses in. The throat dries. Eyes sting. Breathing shortens. Sound becomes frantic, then jagged. Now notice what they have in the first minutes. Only a few pails of water. That's not a plan. That's a gesture. It's what you reach for when you want to believe you still have time. But time is exactly what this room steals. Flames find the waste. Waste feeds the flames. Smoke fills the aisles. The aisles funnel people. And every obstacle that looked harmless, every table edge, every machine, every narrow passage, becomes a hand on your shoulder, slowing you down. Your instincts tell you to run straight. The room tells you to turn, to squeeze, to hesitate, to wait for someone ahead of you to move. This isn't bravery or panic as a personality trait. It's geometry. It's layout. It's a workplace built for output, not evacuation. Triangle Waste Company occupied the 8th, 9th, and 10th floors. 3 layers stacked above the city, connected by stairways and shafts that turn into channels for heat and smoke. When the 8th floor goes, the floors above aren't in a different building. They're in the same system. This is routine turning lethal. A chain reaction built out of everyday conditions. You can feel it in your throat before you can name it. You can taste it before you can outrun it. And in a room like this, the worst part is how quickly your choices shrink. Not into 2 options, into 1. Next, even if you find a door, you have to ask a harder question. Will it open? 4. Find the exit. Touch the knob. Pull. Nothing. And the people behind you learn the lock only when they collide. This is where the story stops feeling like fire and starts feeling like policy. Some doors were locked to prevent theft, not during a crisis, as a routine, as a rule. And when smoke turns a corridor into pressure, a locked door doesn't just block you, it rearranges the crowd. It tells everybody behind you to keep pushing, because forward is the only direction left. Stay in that narrow space, heat on your face, noise behind you, a hand on your shoulder that isn't trying to hurt you, just trying to survive. People press, and panic doesn't come as a scream, it comes as weight. It comes as compression. The air thins, the floor feels smaller, the doorway becomes a bottleneck, and the bottleneck becomes a trap. Now watch how quickly options turn into geometry. One option is the stairs. Smoke makes them a gamble. Another is the fire escape. It exists, so your brain clings to it. You imagine metal steps and fresh air. You imagine relief, but it can be overloaded. And when too many people are forced toward the same route, the structure fails. The fire escape collapses, not because the people are wrong to run, because the building was never meant to carry that many bodies. So the crowd splits, not by choice, by physics. Some people go toward the elevator shaft. It's not a plan. It's a last opening in a room that is closing. Others go to the windows because a window is still an opening, still air, still light, still a way to breathe for one more moment. From the street, it looks like hesitation. Up here, it's arithmetic. Smoke behind you, heat in front of you, a drop beneath you. The mind searches for the smallest pain it can choose. And this is the moment that breaks something in the viewer. Because you want to believe there is always a correct action. There isn't. There are only shrinking margins. People jump. People fall. Those words are too clean. They don't hold the reality of a body choosing gravity over flame, but they are what happened. By the end, 146 people are dead. That number is not a symbol. It is the cost of a system that treated safety as optional and theft prevention as urgent. A locked door became a verdict. A crowded escape became a collapse. And once the city saw bodies in the windows, it could not return to pretending that work was separate from danger. It could not unsee what ordinary rules can do when fire arrives. The fire ended fast. The damage did not. In about 18 minutes, it was over. And then the city had to keep looking at what was left. Step outside the building. The air is suddenly wider, but your chest is tighter. People gather because they can't not gather. Names are searched for. Faces are scanned. And for days, identification takes time that no one can afford to spend. But everyone is forced to spend anyway. The numbers land like weights. 129 women, 17 men, most of them young immigrants from Europe, not strangers in a headline. Workers with pay to collect, meals to cook, letters to answer. And now, a silence that has to be processed, one body at a time. Walk with the crowd. On April 5th, 1911, a memorial procession draws 100,000 people. That isn't spectacle. That is a city admitting it saw something it cannot unsee. Between those moments, life keeps trying to restart. Shops open, streetcars move, people go back to work. And that normality is the hardest part to watch, because the conditions that trapped them were not rare. They were ordinary. They were choices stacked into policy. Convenience over clearance, production over exits, silence over inspection. And ordinary things are what make disasters repeatable again. Now follow the story into a courtroom. The owners are prosecuted for manslaughter, and in December 1911, they are acquitted. The fire is gone, but the argument begins. If no one is responsible, then the building itself was the weapon. The rules were the weapon. The routine was the weapon. So the pressure moves where pressure always moves. Into government. In June, New York State creates the Factory Investigating Commission. Not as a gesture, as a machine built to keep asking, room by room, staircase by staircase, what made escape impossible. For the next year and a half, it investigates and holds hearings. And then the slow part happens. More than 30 laws on health and safety, fire codes, restrictions on child labor, pages of requirements that sound boring until you remember what boredom buys you. Time. A door that opens, a ladder that reaches, a path that stays a path. This is why the aftermath matters. The fire didn't just burn cloth, it burned denial. It has been called a general awakening because the city finally saw how fragile a worker becomes when systems fail at once. One fire escape that collapses, A fire ladder that is too short. Doors locked. Doors opening the wrong way. A safety net that tears. And reports later point to what follows. Legal reform, labor rights, workplace safety. Not because tragedy automatically creates change, but because, for once, people could not turn away. On March 25, 1911, a fire in a New York City garment factory ended with 146 people dead. But the ending wasn't the flames. It was the system that let a workplace become a cage. Out on the street, up on the 8th floor, at the locked doors, you watched normal rules turn lethal in full public view. And after, safety laws changed because the city couldn't look away. If you want more stories where buildings, jobs, and policies decide who lives, like, subscribe, comment, and share. This wasn't fate, this was design.